Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. What has been your biggest, I really thought I knew this person moment? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. A guy I was kind of irregularly working with for 2 to 3 years as a student. We'd met once in a cafe to talk through some project-related issues. Was one day wanted by Interpol. Turned out he invited a random language teacher to his flat and decapitated her. He might have been an asshole, but there's a difference between an asshole and a murderer. I had a friend of 18 years overdose on heroin. None of us knew he did drugs. He didn't even smoke cigarettes. It was beyond shocking. I was with my partner for 15 years. We were high school sweethearts. One day out of nowhere, he started this fight with me. A fight big enough to make him suggest to stay at a friend's house for a night to cool off. The fight was over me buying a male coworker gummy bears. The night turned into a week. He blocked my phone and I was unable to reach him. He came back in the middle of the night to grab things and told me he wanted to break up. I was so confused and felt blindsided. I ended up finding out he was in a 10-year relationship with the girl he met on like a role-playing Discord server. He was having a double life. When I would go to sleep at night, he would be on the phone with her. He flew out to get engaged to her the week he blocked me. The kicker is, she was married when they got engaged. This was a year ago. She is still married, and my ex is still in a relationship with her. I tweaked the reporting system for a large payroll system to improve its runtime from 8 hours to only 2. Submitted the changes to the head programmer with all my testing results. She took all the credit, used my expertise, and told management I had nothing to do with the improvements after I called her out on her BS. Worked alongside of her for 5 years prior and thought we were friends. A girl I worked with a few years ago ended up being one of those creepy catfishers. She initiated and continued an online relationship with one of her best friends, even made up other ancillary accounts for all the other made-up friends and family. She was such a lovely girl too, really witty and fun to work with. Turned up at a party. A buddy of mine was there, bodybuilder. He was taking steroids at the time. Door security at a rough Liverpool club. Hard bloke that you would not want to get the wrong side of. He was wearing a charming dress, impeccable makeup, and drinking a cocktail. When my wife cheated on me. Sounds really stereotypical, but she was the last person on earth I would have thought would do something like that. Good friend of mine. Known each other since we were very young, etc. On the phone one day, and he sends me a screenshot of a Reddit post he thought was funny. I joke about how now I'm going to go stalk his account. User visible in a comment. And he gets freaked out and hangs up. Thought it was strange, so checked out his account. He was active in some very disturbing subs, talking about how he successfully seduced a 10-year-old girl, and if there was anything actually legally wrong with doing things with her since she was also underage, 17. Me and my best mate at the time reported him, but nothing came of it, since they couldn't prove he had nefarious intent. I had a friend in high school who was so nice to me and everyone I knew. He was a transfer from another school. Everyone liked him. We all would hang out with him in and outside of school. Go-yo parties with him, etc. We came into school one Monday and he wasn't there. Then he didn't show up for a few days. No one knew what had happened to him. Then we all learned on the news that he had murdered someone during a gang initiation via drive-by. He shot and killed a random man who was coming out of a Walmart with bags full of baby supplies. It took a couple of days, but him and the driver were both caught. He has life in prison, if I remember correctly. One of our teachers, who was a TA visited him for a few years. She would bring him books to read. She may still be in contact with him. I'm not sure. I met a guy in college. We were both dating other people at the time, so we would hang out together instead of going out to parties and getting wasted. He was my safe buddy, always a gentleman. We stayed friends for 7 years, but were always dating other people. Finally, we were both single at the same time. We talked every day, and decided that I would take a week off and fly cross country to see him. My flight ended up being diverted to DC instead of Philly. He told me he'd take a train up, and he'd pay me back for the train ride. So I've now spent $600+ for flights, $120 for a train, and I'm losing about $1,000 taking off a week from work. I get to 30th station, and he doesn't pick up his phone. And he didn't pick up his phone for 5 days. He left me stranded at the train station, even though we had been texting all day. I cried. I panicked. I called a girlfriend from college who was able to pick me up and house me for the week. When I finally reached him, I laid into him. What kind of person does that? All he said was, "I don't know what to tell you. People suck. Lesson learned." What the F? After 7 years. Guess I didn't know him after all. Look at you, Sean. That is such odd behavior. I mean, first of all, it's terrible what they did to you. And what a total jerk. But I'm sorry that you lost that. Luckily, you did have somebody to stay with, but that's an expensive lesson to learn, to discover that person's a piece of garbage. This is a funny, how did I not know this about you moment. Several years ago, I was flipping around on television and came across something on the other side about the band Disturbed. Just like that, out of nowhere, my husband started basically giving me a biography of every member of the band, as though it was all common knowledge. We'd been together about 10 years at that point, and I had no idea he even liked Disturbed, much less knew so much about them. He'd literally never talked about it before. Surprised the heck out of me. I dated a guy for a year. We'd been good friends some years prior, who was very smart and studied rocket science. I studied material engineering. We wrote a 100 paper together on new rocket models for a research contest and did approximately 50-50 of the work together. He lived in a big city and I lived further away, so I asked him to go hand in the printed copy to the university that organized the contest. Some weeks later, he told me he'd been to the uni to ask about our paper status and told me we hadn't been selected for the contest. So I trusted him and we went out on a compensation dinner. A few weeks later, I saw that little bitch on the university's Instagram doing a speech on our work. He presented our work with only his name and erased my credits. We'd actually been selected, and he got a diploma and a prize for our work. And I was only mentioned in the agreements page alongside his family for providing emotional support. Minor compared to all of you, but I dated a guy who bragged about how smart and successful he was and made me feel like an idiot for sticking with one job for 5+ years. He said I was too financially conservative and not enough of a risk taker. He talked big about his salary and how important he was. It turns out he was continually job hopping due to performance issues, bad decisions, and boredom. In 8th grade, I went to school with a kid who was walking to his buddy's house to watch the Super Bowl. He came across one of his neighbors. She was 8 or 9 years old. He brutally murdered her, put the mangled body in a trash bag, threw her in a dumpster, and then continued to his friend's house and watched the game as if nothing happened. My ex's best friend stopped talking to her on a dime. I thought it was strange, but the best friend wasn't the most stable person. 2 happy years of our relationship later, I found out why. She got drunk with the BFF and admitted that her endometriosis, the illness around which we organized our lives, was just made up, fictitious, done for attention. We went to fundraisers and awareness events. She was pretty well known as a vocal activist. She'd had exploratory surgery to find adhesions. Perhaps unsurprisingly, nothing was found. Suddenly, a lot of little things clicked into place. I corroborated a few things, contacted some people about this and that, and every suspected lie was backed up by the testimony of something. It took me a couple of days, but I worked up the gumption to toss her ass. No asking questions, no hearing her side, just tossed her aside. 0 effing regrets. My best friend from childhood. Every year his dad would have a huge get-together on his property up in the cottage country. Everyone would set up trailers and tents, and we'd spend the week fishing, boating, off-roading, shooting, drinking, and doing drugs, and all together having a great time. Anyway, one year my friend says he doesn't want to go up because he has no money. Now our families have been friends for years, so I'm welcome to go with or without him, but he's my best friend, and it wouldn't be as fun if he didn't come. So I offered to cover his costs. I bought the train tickets for there and back. I bought all of our food and alcohol for the week. Then I gave him $200 cash for general spending money. I was very clear about what I expected. I'll cover all the expenses. don't worry about any of it, but pay me back $200 cash when you have it. He spends it all pretty quickly and asks me for more. I give him another $200 and repeat it. Pay me back the cash I give you. You owe me $400. He says it's not a problem. A relative of his had passed recently, and he was going to get around $8,000 from her will. We had a great time, and a few weeks went by. I had been pretty busy with college and hadn't spoken to him much in that time, but I knew he had gotten his inheritance. Anyways, I popped by his place to hang out, and his room is decked out with all the great new stuff. Brand new top-of-the-line gaming computer, desk, chair, mouse, keyboard, gigantic monitor. He's got a bunch of brand new name clothing, a new PlayStation, a new TV, etc. He's showing me all this awesome new stuff. It's great. Eventually, I asked him if he had the $400 that I loaned him, and he started acting all cagey. It was my understanding you were covering all of the costs, except for the cash. I told you to pay me back the cash I gave you. I recall differently. So I repeated our whole first conversation when I offered to help him. I recall differently. I repeat our conversation when he asked for more and told me about his inheritance coming up. I recall differently. This went back and forth, and he had nothing more to say, other than he remembered differently than I did. Eventually I just said whatever, regardless of what he remembered. I spent a lot of money covering costs for both of us that week. Can he pay me back some of that money, especially now that he recently received $8,000? I don't have any left. I spent it all. I had never spent a single penny on him from that moment since. Never paid for a pizza, never gave him $1 for bus fare, never let him bum a cigarette or a beer. That was the beginning of the end of our friendship. It lasted a couple of years longer, but it was a long downhill ride. One of my very closest friends, we did everything together. I referred to this girl as my sister. She had some severe mental health problems, and some people had warned me to keep my distance, but I loved her and thought she'd never want to hurt me. Then one day, when she was drunk, she told me that if she ever committed suicide, she'd arrange it so I was the only one to find her body. She trusted that I'd know what to do. She expected me to be flattered. A couple of years later, she died, tried to do exactly that. Then was furious with me when I called 911. Yeah. My sister has always been selfish. She was spoiled terribly by my parents. It seemed as if things were better as she grew up and had her own family. She called me upset because her son's Cub Scout pack was accusing her of stealing money. She claimed they were terrible at keeping accurate spending records, and she could prove that, and that she is in fact helped them get the books straight. She lied. She stole $10,000 from children because she thought no one would notice. She's a terrible human, and I want no contact eventually. A friend I met at uni in first year while studying psychology. Friend for 6 years and far along in our journey of study. Very long pathway to become a registered psychologist here. We're both mums to young kids doing the study, parent juggle, in regular contact, supporting each other with the study load. She had a breakdown and quickly spiraled into alcohol and meth addiction from a very affluent family. Supportive husband walked away from her life. Child protection involvement. Saw her earlier this year at her birthday party thrown by her family, and she is a shell of her former self. Tweaking and twitching, paranoid, disorganized, and thinking and speech. Completely psychotic. I'm grieving the loss of my friend. I'm so sad and I miss her so much. She's too far gone. I don't think she'll ever recover. I graduated, got qualified, just about to get my clinical endorsement, and it's been bittersweet because she's not beside me. I called my husband's best friend pleading for help for his opioid addiction that I thought just started about a year before. The friend lives on the opposite side of the country and grew up with him. I tell him about the situation, and he goes, "Oh shit, he's into that again? Again?" I had no idea. I thought this man was through and through. We were best friends for 8 years before we even started dating. We're now divorced. Safe to say I have some real trust issues. Best friend 15 years ago paid for us to move to Colorado together. Literally paid for everything. Soon as we were settled into a place, he tells me he's always hated me and knew I had resources he could take advantage of. Colorado was his idea, but he sold it so well. Also, we had countless times hanging out, laughs, and having each other's backs. There was never a reason to question this, being my best friend. We never fought either. That was a tough one. Alcohol, weed, and everything but my dogs. I've never hated someone so much.